Hello and welcome. What I'd like to do today is spend a few minutes understanding how a manuscript is produced in preparation for sending it off to a journal. Now clearly there are differences between different journals, but this is a process of building the generic first run of it, that then the manuscript can be tailored to the appropriate journal at the end point, and if the article is rejected, can always be reformatted. So this is the generic building style for it. But before we start doing that, let's take a look at what a paper looks like at the end product and dissect it so we understand exactly what we need for producing an article. Now the first thing to notice is obviously a journal article has a title, has some authors, has some location information, and this is sort of the preset information that is needed for an article. And in this day and age, with a lot of reviews of article being done, this needs to be separated from the actual text of the article. And down here we can see the text of the article starting off. With the text of an article, different journals have different ways of doing referencing. Most popular at the moment is by superscript numbers. You can see a reference superscripted here. I think that's the only one. Oh, I can see one just down here as well. There we go, 1, 2. And these superscript numbers run in order through the text. However, when you're first preparing your manuscript, the words of your text will move around all the time. So if you do superscript number referencing from the very start, it takes hours and hours, if not days, to actually make it work. And then at the end you redo at any rate. So for the first run through and the many drafts that you do in preparation, it's recommended that you don't use numbered references, and the approach I take is just to actually put the name and the year in there, just in like referencing in the old days. Notice also that all articles have key headers in them, and we just have to remember that they are going to have to be part of the text as we do it. So that's some of the things we need to think about. Then as we go and have a look further down the article, for example, this is the very end of this particular randomly chosen article, you'll notice again there's various headers. Here's some more. And then we get down to the references. Now journals have lots of different styles for referencing. When you're drafting your article, don't worry about it. Just put it in any format that you feel comfortable doing. Just get the reference down. And then at the very end you can complete the formatting of the references. Now lots of people use all sorts of programs, electronic systems to do these. Most journal articles usually put a limit of around 20 or 25 references at most, and personally I find it easier just to keep them as text in the Word document, and to format 20 references is actually not hard to do. And if you do it by hand, you do it on a reasonably regular basis, probably only takes you an hour or so, and at the same time you're actually checking the references and being sure that they're the right ones for the right place. It's a lot less error prone to do it that way. So that's little hints on references. And the last thing to notice, and this is just a random bit again midway through, is to look at how figures are done. If you notice with a figure, here's a figure here, we have the figure itself, but every single figure underneath it usually has some sort of figure caption. Here's one here, here's another one here. This is obviously related to this figure here. This is a bit poor. This was only a draft of this article, but here you can see this is the legend for actually the table that sits just a wee bit below it. I think there it is there. And you notice how, for figures in this particular journal, the legend sits below the figure, whereas for tables, the legend sits above the figure. You don't have to worry about that when you're actually writing the journal article. Then you can do it I'll show you the generic way of doing it, but just so you recognise that there are these variations. The other thing to notice, what you can see on this page, just at the top here, do you notice on this particular article, percentages are done as percents? And there are variants on different journals of different styles of doing all sorts of things. You know, do they use miles or kilometres? Do they use percent as a symbol, or do they write out percent? There's all those variations. When you're first writing it, don't worry about it. Write it in the style that fits you, and at the end spend 15 minutes just reformatting it to fit what you want. So this is a dissection of what a journal article looks like. From here, what we'll do is we'll now go on and actually look at how this developed from the start. So here is what a paper starts off like. Now what I'm looking at here is actually the cover page of this paper. So the important things to note on the cover page, which is the single front page, is, like we said, here's the title, here's the authors, and here's where they're from. The other little additions that you see on a front page are often the key words, as a list of about half a dozen words are on the front page, as is the address for the corresponding author. This information is left on this page because in the process of anonymous review of articles, the cover page is not given to the reviewer, and therefore all the identifying material on the cover page is masked to the reviewer. So in drafting a paper, make sure the front page is the only place where this information sits. If we look what comes on the second page, the second page is the abstract. And on the abstract page, we always repeat the title, and then we have the abstract. An abstract should, for all intents and purposes, only run for no more than a single page. And do notice with the text that it is in double-spaced 12-point font with no justification. And this is just to make for simple reading, and this is the preset format that most journals like. So make sure it is double-spaced. And as I said, the abstract usually runs just for a single page, if not shorter. Lots of journals have word limits for abstracts, and remember, on Word, Microsoft Word, you can actually count the words of various sections to work out how long it is, and often they set a 200 or 250 word limit. Make sure you stay within that limit. The other important thing about an abstract is it has no references in it. So make sure when you do an abstract that you put no references within it. As we move further through the article, we get down to the content of the article. And here's a typical part of the content. Do you notice again, no formatting, a little bit of underline for headers here, for example, and maybe on other places you might see some bold for other headers. Oh, do you notice I've seen an error already? See this area here? This should have had an underline under it. So we know that's an error. Usually when I see errors, I put a little X in the margin, so when I come back to it, I can actually edit that easily and find the error. Things to notice about the text. Paragraphs are usually separated by a line. No indenting, no interesting formats, just a simple separation of a line. The other thing to notice on this version is that the text is justified here, which shouldn't be the case. I would send this back. I'll put an X here as well, and I'd write justify like that. So that would be to turn the justification off. So manuscript shouldn't have right justification on. So this is a typical page of text. Remember, a journal article, including the abstract, should be about 10 pages. It will have usually about 20 references, which will come on a separate page, and it will usually have about 5 tables or figures, and that's the maximum. You should never really go above this. So an article should be no more than about 10 double-spaced 12-point font pages. That's about the limit. Now that's not always the case. Some great articles are 2 pages. I think from memory, the Special Theory of Relativity by Albert Einstein runs for about 1.5 pages. And other review articles can run tens of pages, 30 pages or whatever. But for all intents and purposes, if you stick to the 10-page limit, you will optimize your chances of getting your publication published. And the last thing to think about is how the references are. And remember I said, or in fact we've got to talk about the figures as well. First thing to notice is references always start on a fresh page. So always put a page break and then start the references. References, when you're drafting up, just need to be in any format that you are comfortable with and efficient at doing. Notice here that if you're using web-based references, make sure when you actually access them you record the date, because lots of people, most journals these days expect that the date of access will be on the reference. So just jot that down as you do the reference. Don't worry if the formats are all wrong or change or whatever. Just put them down in a rapid list as you're writing and developing your paper. And if we just head back to the text, maybe we can see a reference in this text. Can I see one in here? Let's have a look. No, there isn't. That's a bit sad. But at any rate, if you were putting a reference in the text, please make sure the reference is done as words with the year. Now, clearly, when you actually end up going to do the journal article, you might change those to numbered superscripts and things for the final version, but while you're just doing the editing and preparation, put them as the names and the year. That way you'll never lose them connected as the text moves around as you're rewriting, and things will work out well with the reference system. So now let's have a look at how you undertake the development of the figures in preparation for your manuscript being finished. The figures come on individual pages at the very end of the document. Now notice again, page break. And immediately above here, the page above, is the references. So the very last pages in your paper are the tables. And obviously they're numbered in sequential order. I've cheated. I've actually just taken an image of table 2 here, not table 1, but we'll keep pressing on. So a page break following the references. Now, each table and figure has a legend, and the legend needs to be a short explanatory note of the table sitting below. Make sure you get the numbering right as well, so table 2, and that would be referenced back into the text. And there's a separate video where we'll talk about how to actually construct tables, but just for your information, this table is pasted as an image in here. So it's a clear-cut version that's uneditable of the table. Make sure you can build the tables in Excel, and we'll talk about later. Now notice that there is one figure or one table per page. Here's another page break. So there is one table or one figure per page. We'll go down and have a look at a figure now and see how that looks. Here we have a figure. Similarly things again. Notice the page break. up here. Notice the legend with the numbering, figure 1, and remember that always put all the tables first and then all the figures second. That just keeps your mind organised, and as you're reading through it you know where to flick to look at it. Now there's something on this figure that I would be asking for change. Do you notice how these figures have these boundaries around it, these edges here? Journals don't want that, and in fact I know when this article came back for review they asked us to remove them. So don't ever put borders around figures like that. And the same as the tables, one per physical page. Now notice that this figure has a top and bottom, and usually in the figure legend something would tell you the difference between the top and the bottom, and here you can see it's 2008 and 2009, but I would have expected in here there to be 2008 top and 2009 next to it would be bottom. So then the editor is explicitly clear as to which one is which. So let's just summarise how you design a paper manuscript. Firstly, about 10 pages plus 20 references, thereabouts, plus about 5 tables or figures. Cover page on its own, abstract on its own, then you have the text, then you have the references, then the tables, and then the figures. And between each figure there's a page break. Between each table there's a page break, and between each of these there's a page break. So in the end, the total sheets of paper that this will cover would probably come to something like 15 to 20 pages of paper. Remember, always double-spaced. Always 12-point font, and always left justify only. And remember also, when you're doing these references, when you do the references, that the references can be done in any format, but in the text use names and years. But in the text, use names and years. Because that way you won't get caught out. Thank you.